Good morning. Today we're going to be working on a really cool 58 reissue that belongs to a regular customer. He brought it in to have the typical fret dress and setup done on it. It has a few issues that we're going to address. First off, I want to mention this is going to be the 105th official Plect fret dress I have redone. So we may get into that a little bit, but the big thing we want to talk about on this guitar is tailpiece height, bridge height, and so on. It's a big controversial issue. I have my reasons for my stance. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to show you another cool trick to kind of eliminate some of the problems a lot of people want to talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to fret dress this and set it up, and then we're going to move on to a few other things. This is actually a pretty cool guitar. The sunburst isn't showing up very well in the photos and the video. It's being washed out. It's really a very cool sunburst. I actually have to admit I kind of talked this guy into buying a 58. I play one. They're really nice guitars. They can actually be a little bit better, and we're going to get into that. One of the things I run into a lot is things like this with the bridge height adjustments. The studs in a lot of cases do not come up to the top of the guitar well enough. They don't really protrude out of the top enough. So you've got your bridge setting on something like this. So it tends to want to rock. That causes a bit of tuning problems. And of course, he's done the wraparound like a lot of people do. I have issues with that. I tried it myself in the 70s, walked away from it, even though one of my heroes, the Reverend, does that. It actually doesn't do a lot of good. So, anyway, we'll get back to a reason for that and a way to actually make your guitar sound a little bit better. So we'll be back in a bit. Well, we've made it to neck jig. We're all jigged up. I've been checking out the fret job here. Again, what we've got is the marker marks, the black Sharpie marks on top of the frets, show us our high spots. So let's take a look at what the Plect left behind. So there's some pretty nasty spots here. Also, something that you can't see here because of the marks is right in the middle of the fingerboard. Probably because of these two high frets, hopefully. We've got a pretty good rock from end to end with the straight edge. The same on the bass side right here. The center of the neck seems to be okay. So this is pretty much all we're going to say about the fret job on this. What we're going to do is go ahead and just level the frets, do what we do, fix it. This actually shows you where a neck jig comes in handy. A lot of people don't think that a neck jig can do as well as an electronic fret dressing system. I actually, in my early days, did not believe that a neck jig was necessary until I ran into an issue where I saw where the benefits were. So we've got to thank Mr. Erlewine for coming up with this idea. So I'm going to get on with fret dressing this guitar and get it straightened up to where it plays better. Then we'll continue on with what we really want to talk about on this. We're back with the finished guitar. It's been set up, fret dressed, everything's all done that we planned on doing. At this point I just clean it up and usually get it ready to send it home. But we're going to go a little farther. As I said before, this fellow is a regular customer of mine. We've done several of his guitars. We're going to go a little farther here. We're actually going to add a little sparkle, a little bit more presence to this guitar. We've set the bridge and tailpiece the height that we want it. And we're not going to get into a whole lot of detail here about how I surmise where I'm going to get with the tailpiece height, but you can see that it's not all the way down on the body. I've had a lot of people that know more than I do from forums and so on inform me that anybody that knows anything about a Les Paul knows that the tailpiece has to go all the way down on the body for maximum tone and sustain. Well, guess what, kids? It doesn't. After you go down to a certain point, all you do is break strings and bend bridges. It makes the guitar stiff. I actually have a lot of reasons for what I believe, and you can't just say all Les Pauls, because the 70s models and so on actually had a steeper neck set, which meant that the bridge had to be higher, which meant the tailpiece has to be higher. And to back up this, I have my poster child handy here. This is a bridge off of a 70s Les Paul. The customer that had this bridge had replaced bridges on his guitar 3 times. He frequented a store I used to work at. He could not figure why he kept having to replace bridges. Well, I told him his tailpiece was too low. He continued to replace bridges and even would bend the studs for the bridge because it would compress so much. So what happens here is when these bend like this, they sag in the middle, your D and G string become lower, they don't match the radius of the fingerboard, so you have buzzing all over on those 2 strings, and a whole host of other problems. It can be avoided. So keep that in mind. I keep this bridge around to explain almost weekly why I do what I do with these bridges. So if you want to keep replacing bridges, or if you don't want to know any better, well, that's fine, but I don't. So this is why I do it. Okay? Getting back to what we're talking about improving the sustain and tone on this guitar, is one of the reasons people crank the tailpieces down so low is they crank it down to where the stud for the tailpiece seats on top of the insert in the body, making a very tight metal to metal contact. You're not hearing string pressure angle, you're hearing metal to metal contact. So the solution for this is an old solution that I've been using for quite some time. We use 2 little Allen screws that match the threads of the tailpiece, and what we do is you measure the height of the tailpiece when it's set the way you want it. Then you put these in and bottom them out in the body as low as far as they'll go down in. Then you measure the difference and you grind it off of the Allen screws. When you put it all back together, it's a height you want it set at, and it's locked solid. It's the same thing. But your tailpiece is up in the air where it needs to be. Now, what we're going to do with the bridge studs is we're going to replace them with longer stainless steel bolts. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure the height that the bridge sets off the body. We're going to thread the inserts all the way down in till they bottom out. We're going to measure up that height. We're going to mark the studs, and we're going to cut them off out of the guitar. Alright? Then we're going to turn them back over, insert the cut end down in so that the finished end's on top, up here. And what's going to happen is when your action is set where you had it, the bolts will be flush with the top of the bridge on both sides. They'll be more solid and it won't rock around like we was talking about earlier. So I'll be back. All finished up. That took about 35 minutes. I probably futzed around a few more minutes than I had to, making sure that these lined up straight. I just wanted them straight across, just one of my little quirks. Anyway, if we get into this looking at it, you see now that our bolts come to the top of the bridge. And as hard as I try, there's no way I can move that like I could earlier. So that'll improve tuning stability. That'll actually help sustain. The guitar rings like crazy. By doing this, you actually get more resonance out of the guitar and a presence that's really kind of hard to explain. I've done it for years on guitars. Even Ibanez's, Epiphones, everything can see an advantage from this. The only thing with doing the imports, you gotta source out a few metric screws here and there, but it can all be done. It helps a lot. So anyway, I'm going to wipe this little guy up. I've put in a pretty long week so far, and I'm going to make my phone calls to let everybody know what's been done for the week. And I'm going to go home and take a break until tomorrow when I have to deal with people picking things up and dropping more stuff off. So until next time, later, play nice with others.